I'm shocked how many people fundamentally misunderstand The Brutalist, its ending, and it's led to some of the wildest discourse this entire Oscar season. The Brutalist has been hailed by some as one of the greatest American epics of all time, despite its recent release, and comparing it to The Godfather, Once Upon a Time in America, Lawrence of Arabia, or maybe most recently There Will Be Blood. Being crafted at such a scale that feels uncommon when looking at American cinema, sure, our box office and theaters are often filled with these big and bloated blockbusters, but that isn't quite the same as having a drama tackling the topics of exploring the American dream, immigration, control over your own identity and personhood as an artist, if that can extend to your work, exploring Judaism and its relationship to Zionism, as well as the United States' relationship to Zionism, as well as a number of other topics and themes from a film filled with a stacked cast delivering across the board career best performances from Adrian Brody, Felicity Jones, Guy Pearce, and Joe Alwyn. It was remarkable to hear this film from Brady Corbet, who had already been familiar with because of the 2018 Natalie Portman film Vox Lux, and witness all of a sudden The Brutalist premiering at the Venice International Film Festival on September 1st, 2024, with Brady Corbet winning Silver Lion at the festival, or the equivalent of Best Director, and then the film playing at the Toronto International Film Festival, New York Film Festival, and others, which had already followed A24 getting rights to the film, and an intense bidding war following that Venice premiere, and to the shock of many who watch and follow awards season, sadly pushing Sing Sing and Queer to the side, with the former likely receiving more nominations if it had been given a better Oscars push. And since The Brutalist has landed in front of more eyes, it's largely maintained that same reception, with the most notable outcry and criticism being if the second half of the film is as strong as the first half, questioning aspects of the film's epilogue, and wondering if the film's ending endorses themes of Zionism, which I think that regardless if you believe the film is saying anything directly about the state of Israel, and if it should exist, or if what the film is saying implies anything about Israel, it would only be in the direction of anti-Zionism. I'll be real, because I've had a number of really heated discussions with people about the film, people who really respect me, who've taken the film, I think, at very much face value, or listened to other people who watched the film very early and took the film at face value, and aren't looking quite deep enough. I think the Zionist interpretation of the ending contradicts the entire spirit of the film. It doesn't really make sense as an interpretation, and also goes against everything Brady Corbet has said about the film and its ending, because he had to clarify because so many people just didn't get it. And that means today my goal is to break down my interpretation of the ending of The Brutalist and why I think the film is anti-Zionist. And I can't believe I'm saying these words out loud. In order to understand that ending, we need to talk about how the United States is complicit in the creation of Israel, not just literally but also culturally, and doing a bit of a meta-analysis about the film and also its reception, and talking about what control do we have as an artist about our own art and its interpretations. This is not nearly as dense as a video that you might expect on my page, and I also want to be very clear, there's so many themes when going into this film. I'm not covering everything in this video. That would be a multi-hour video, and that's not what I'm trying to do here. I just want to talk about this ending and kind of break down my interpretation of that point and the other points of the film that we need to connect in order to get that ending. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoy videos like this or other video essays, please do like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell, comment with your diatribe or rant or multi-essay paragraph about how I'm wrong and don't actually pay attention to the video. Also, if you want to follow me on other places, I post daily on TikTok. I'm also on Letterboxd, Blue Sky, and Instagram. And please, without further ado, let's talk about The Brutalist. The film opens in 1947 with Laszlo Toth, a Hungarian Jewish Holocaust survivor, arriving to Ellis Island, and as he stumbles out of the cargo hold of the ship he was on, we see the image of the Statue of Liberty upside down and askew, which you can see on the poster for the film, and also immediately alludes to this idea of the American dream being this warped ideal. I'll obviously be talking about this later. Laszlo ends up in Philadelphia and meets his cousin and wife, now learning that Laszlo's wife Erzsébet and his niece Zofia have survived the concentration camp where they were imprisoned in, which was a different one than Laszlo was in. Laszlo is then asked by his cousin to work with him on a job from a man to renovate his father's library, with the man's son, Harry Lee Van Buren, played by Joe Alwyn, a man who's drawn the ire of a vocal pop star's fandom for just existing, period. Unfortunately, his father, Harrison, played by Guy Pearce, returns early, is furious, chases out Laszlo and his cousin without paying them, now leading Laszlo's cousin to kick him out of their home, leading Laszlo to work with Cole, become addicted to heroin, and work with his close friend Gordon, a black man who assisted with Laszlo on the library project, whose presence upset Harrison's mother because she's a racist lady in the 40s. Harrison has recognized the attention he could receive for the library, and after having a publication about the new library in an architecture magazine, retrieves Laszlo and makes him aware that he knows that he was a famous architect in Europe, leading Laszlo to a fancy dinner party at the Van Buren estate. Learning that Harrison's lawyer has connections to the US government, is able to get Erzsébet and Zofia to America, and Harrison volunteering Laszlo to build a community center in memory of Harrison's mother. We will now have a 15-minute intermission in this video to symbolize the 15-minute intermission during the actual movie. Dun 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 dun. I'm kidding, everyone. That's not going to happen. You don't have to worry about that. But the music's good. I'd play it more if I wouldn't get a copyright strike. Dun 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 dun. Anyways, it's the second half of the movie, and now it's 1953. Laszlo finally sees his wife and niece, with Zofia being unable to speak and Erzsébet being horned up out of her mind seeing her husband. Progress is happening somewhat on this community center, with Laszlo constantly clashing with everyone on the project, sometimes arbitrarily changing measurements of a building in order to say that this building is his. After some time, Zofia is likely assaulted by Harry, and after derailment of a train carrying materials for the center, the project is abandoned, leading Laszlo to become an architect for a small firm in 1958. Zofia, now having the ability to speak, chooses to go to Israel, which Laszlo and Erzsébet question, and Harrison tells Laszlo to come back and work on the building. While in Italy to buy marble for the project, Harrison assaults Laszlo, causing Laszlo to become distraught as soon as he comes back to work on the project in America. It's at this point where Erzsébet's pain from osteoporosis becomes too overwhelming, and once her medication runs out, Laszlo decides to start giving her heroin. She becomes addicted, ODs, and in her drug-induced haze says it's time to go to Israel. A real lucid and valid endorsement if I could guess. Erzsébet then confronts Harrison during a dinner party about his actions, shaming him and causing guests to recoil after she is dragged, and Harrison goes missing, the audience never understanding for sure what happens to him. And in the controversial epilogue, the film's aspect ratio has changed. The film takes on a real shot-on-video look, appearing to be shot on digital and not shot on film, but I still think this is VistaVision. Erzsébet has passed away. There's a retrospective of Laszlo's work at the Venice Biennale of Architecture, which is one of the biggest honors you can receive in the world of architecture, and Zofia thanks Laszlo for giving her a voice as a child and wants to speak for him now that he's much older, using a wheelchair and seems to be unable to speak. She talks about how Laszlo's community center was actually built in the memory of the concentration camps that imprisoned him and his wife, a fact that we can question already, and says that Laszlo once told her, no matter what others try to sell you, it is the destination, not the journey, before we get a jarring disco track running over the credits. And to help understand this jarring epilogue and ending, we actually need to go back and look at the idealistic first half of the film and connect it to the much more shocking and pessimistic second half of the movie. Because I think personally too many people are focusing on this being two halves of a film and an epilogue, and not viewing this as one big beautiful body of work that's all talking about the American dream. The first half highlighting the highs of the American dream, just being given an ounce of luck in order to pursue everything that you want, and the second half where we see all this come crashing down. And we see how that dream consumes your entire personhood and soul, as we see with Laszlo and really so many other people in the film. But even that interpretation denies that there are hints to how misguided Laszlo's hope is in the first half of the film. When my mother's family immigrated to the United States as Cambodian refugees, I'm sure they were fed some kind of tale about the American dream, as are many other immigrants or others across the globe, as they hold on to an ideal of what it means to be an American, that if you just work hard enough, you can achieve every dream that you've ever hoped for, and that is a bold-faced lie. If someone has generational wealth, they don't need to worry about student loans or establishing credit or needing to make connections for any job in the future, and you can even have a name that can put your foot in the door and have you be taken seriously, like with the Van Burens. And especially now, you can't just work hard enough and become a billionaire. Your dad has to have an emerald mine, and you just have to lie about long enough to pretend to be as important as the engineers for the various companies that you work for while the entire internet makes fun of you. You are working against all these kind of guys at school and work, and it takes decades and generations to get even where some of these other families were generations before, and now you're even further behind if you can even catch up. Looking at the first half of the film and what Laszlo achieved, he is able to have his wife and niece brought to the United States, and this all keeps Laszlo trapped in the clutches of the Van Burens, forced to work with them without any choice, any clear indication of meaningful pay aside from shelter, and maybe their fancy food, and also leads Zofia to be assaulted by Harry and Erzsébet to die nearly at the end of the film. While obviously it's important that they were able to escape Europe, especially considering these situations after World War II and surviving the Holocaust, they didn't really get that much fortune going to the United States. The seeds for all these unfortunate events come because of that first half of the film, which only provides glimmers of hope that never erase any problems and never actually come. It makes the film immediately one of my favorite immigrant stories in years because of how painfully honest the film is about this facade of a dream. It's also likely why people do not like that second half of the film. It is feel bad all around, which isn't quite the surface level tone of that first half, with Laszlo seemingly chasing his dreams and the opportunity around him and dedicating years of his life to a project that is at the time not not moving off the ground quite literally, and when coming back to Harrison's employment, is assaulted by him. A scene that a number of people online I've seen question and call unnecessary or irrelevant to the film, which I think we can always question how this type of content in any kind of movie is portrayed in film, but it's also deeply symbolic, reflecting back what Harrison and in turn the American dream has done to Laszlo by the second half of the movie. It's also important to know that there's an implication that this level of harm is done for generations and generations of those who pursue the American dream, and that's why we see Zovia also being assaulted by Harrison's son Harry. These two men are disgusting at every single level after making the Taws feel comfortable before taking advantage of them in multiple ways and also assaulting them. And you also need to look at that symbolically and what this represents, this old money taking advantage of these new immigrants coming to the United States trying to find hope and fortune, and only to be assaulted. And by having the same event happen between the Van Burens and Zovia and Laszlo, it creates a parallel between the two that's also key to shaping of Zovia's character by the end of the film, and I'll also talk about that more later. And to connect the American dream to America itself, the film never really portrays America or its quote-unquote intended purpose in a flattering way. Even near the very beginning of the film, we were presented with archival footage from the 1950s Pennsylvania Department of Commerce, setting the stage and introducing us to the fact that most of the film is taking place in Pennsylvania, and more importantly, popping the bubble surrounding American exceptionalism fairly early. It's named that the colonization efforts in Pennsylvania were important as one of the earliest colonies to establish freedom of religion, not shocking to many, but this also whitewashes a large deal of history, ignoring that indigenous people were killed by disease and by violence. And when looking at the Susquehannock people, there were 5,000 to 7,000 in the state of Pennsylvania in the 1600s, and only about 300 or so by 1700. There are always lives lost in colonization, even those that are historically ignored, but ignoring that is also very American. And to expand the conversation about freedom of religion, you should also think about indigenous people not being given freedom to practice their own religion. Just look at the reform schools that popped up all across the United States and also Canada. The Oscars-nominated documentary from this past year, Sugarcane, is a really incredible look at these reform schools. Please do check it out. And you can also expand this more poignantly to the film when talking about Laszlo being a Jewish man and how he's gawked at for being a Jewish man all throughout the entire film or being discriminated against. I mean, one of the examples is him being a Jewish man talking about the horrors of the Holocaust, an atrocity that he survived, where millions of people were lost, and he's being gawked at by people who are so unaware they don't realize, oh, what I'm saying is offensive to this man who survived this horror. It's even being done by a recent convert of Judaism. And I saw a number of people talking about this online, but sure, the film doesn't really dive into Judaism in the ways I think some people expect. We're talking about specifically Laszlo, his cousin, and also their relationship to Jewish identity, and the fact that his cousin also assimilated into being an American by converting outside of Judaism. No shocker at all, but anti-Semitism existed after World War II, and that anti-Semitism was not solely located in Germany. This could be a whole other video that you're better off watching from an American history YouTuber who focuses specifically on the early 20th century, but just looking at World War II, Jewish people were called lazy, and terrible stereotypes about Jewish people were used to imply that they profited off the war. Jewish people were also targeted notably by the Ku Klux Klan during the 20s and the 30s. In a 1938 survey asking Americans their thoughts on Jewish people, 60% openly were willing to be anti-Semitic, and that doesn't even factor in the anti-immigrant sentiment throughout the 30s and 40s that affected Jewish people and their ability to immigrate to escape Germany before World War II, with an estimate I saw naming that 200,000 Jewish people would have been saved with a much more active intervention by the United States, its policies letting in immigrants and refugees at the time. And when you take in a group of people that have survived a genocide against their own people, experience levels of anti-Semitism only in a hair of difference from what was experienced in Germany and Eastern Europe, wouldn't you also want to change your last name like Attila and convert to Catholicism with your wife of Western European ancestral origin and further assimilate to this American Christian culture? And in the first moments that we spend with Attila before he banishes Laszlo, it's this first inkling that in the first half of the film that with the success that he's received as an American businessman running a furniture store, it is only through shedding parts of himself that make him ostracized and a target of discrimination and stripping himself of his identity. For me, this is also where the film starts to make its connections between Jewish identity not feeling safe for Jewish people in the United States, which there is historical evidence for, and why I can imagine why Jewish people went to Israel, a state formed through the deaths of Palestinians and Arab people in the area. Israel is formed through the same colonization efforts as the United States, and the United States is responsible for Israel, whether we think about this from literally being part of the United States and partitioning off parts of Palestinian land for Israel, or the anti-Semitic attitudes of Americans driving the Jewish people to Israel. The film is not defending Israel's existence, it is merely attempting to explain why it's there, and it is ultimately an American and Western problem that it exists. And that is why the Christian ideals of America, maybe specifically manifesting destiny or taking land in the name of God, shapes Israel, and honestly part of why I think so many evangelical Christians Christians support Israel as a country. I've seen over and over and over again quoted the fact that there's more evangelical or Christian Zionists than there are Jewish Zionists. I'm seeing actually one organization quote the fact that there are 30 Christian Zionists for every one Jewish Zionist. The United States is responsible for this evil, and that is all the film directly pushes when it speaks limitedly on Israel. Having Zionist characters in your film is not an endorsement of Zionism itself. Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs existing as a character does not endorse cannibalism. Kind of like how I said people online were saying that the film doesn't talk enough about Judaism, I saw the same about immigration and Zionism, but I think it says a lot about all those topics underneath all these layers. Even if it doesn't make up the majority of the content of the film, what is said here is significant. This also helps us understand why the characters get where they are in the finale, minus Laszlo, and I hope you can understand what Brady Corbet is trying to say about the US's responsibility in creating Israel and perpetuating Zionism. To further understand this epilogue, though, we need to understand as an artist, when are you not in control of your narrative, or more specifically, when does Laszlo have agency and freedom in this film, and how many people really understand Laszlo as a person and the artist or the actual art itself. This forms a meta-narrative that parallels the contents of the film with the ways that people are not interpreting and questioning the film, which is not a byproduct of the film existing in a specific way other than being thematically rich and being an incredibly crafted film. Now, back to the conversation about the artist that is the real man Laszlo Toth, may he rest in peace. Who is he as an artist, and how does that shape the creation of the community center in the film? And the answer is that while we can gather that he holds a lot of pride in his work and he'd much rather be working as an architect compared to existing as a cold laborer or working for his cousin at a furniture store, the bits of his personhood attached to his craft are due to his love of brutalist architecture and under the necessity of wanting to leave his job shoveling literal coal and being asked by Harrison to do so. And now he's stuck making this community center that has to have a library, a theater, a gymnasium, and a chapel that all have to be in one building, and he is trapped creating this architectural nightmare in more than a few ways, with scope and resources being fairly a big issue. And forgive me for repeating myself, but going back to what Zovia said about the actual building itself and how it was structured over the two concentration camps that Erzsébet and Laszlo were in, and also the fact that we see Laszlo say, you know what, I'm just changing this building to make sure that it fits my design and that it's my design. He only altered the dimensions of the building at least once in the film in order to regain some kind of agency and control over the building being his building and his design. That is it. And that is as little as we understand about Laszlo's intentions aside from the dimensions of the building, some of the features of the building, and how present he was as a building site manager. Anything beyond this point with Laszlo is either a projection that we have upon him as an artist or a projection another character in the film has upon him. Even going back to Laszlo working on the library for the surprise for Harrison, it is viewed immediately as Harrison as a project that destroyed his study, and granted a lot of the shock and racism was fueling this reaction, but it's not until he can have the library published in an architectural magazine where he can gain the social capital of having an architect like Laszlo Toth having created such an intimate space, and that's when he finally believes that the space has any form of worth. Now, this is accomplished by an entire article that I'm sure we can zoom in on and gather at least some of the words that Harrison has said about the space, but again, he is in this magazine sharing his thoughts and interpretation about the space. Laszlo has not done this. We also get a number of really small scenes making me question how characters are perceiving each other throughout the film. Two of the least obvious to me are hearing Gordon, Laszlo's friend, and his son speaking about Gordon's wife passing away and how little his son remembers of her. Gordon's son quickly cuts off his father and exclaims that he does remember her, he is just trying to protect his father, leading to an awkward moment in front of the Toths during dinner. Another moment which is so tiny, it took my third watch of the film to finally notice this, but when Harrison's lawyer is seeking out Laszlo, he misspells his name when asking for it to someone who works in the building. It's a weird tiny detail, but shows that even after a decade of knowing him, there's no real attention to the spelling of his name, even though his name was probably in so many press releases for this building, or even just in the original Architecture magazine article. And now let's flash forward to this finale to see Zovia introduce Laszlo during this massive conference. In this, she names that the community center Laszlo built is designed to resemble the two concentration camps that held the Toths, and this was done so that Laszlo could imagine being close to Erzsébet and could process his trauma. And guys, this is bull. This is a complete fabrication. There is nothing in the film that pushes this as an absolute explanation for what's happened here, other than Zovia's words, and how can Laszlo ever challenge her? He is literally having words put into his mouth at a time that he's unable to speak. This is not an endorsement of Israel. Guys, he scoffs at the idea of going to Israel at all as an option earlier in the film, and questions it and faces questions about his own connection to Judaism when he says that he doesn't want to go there. And James, what about Erzsébet? Guys, she does not want to go to Israel until she nearly ODs from heroin in this state, literally being on the verge of death, barely coherent, and she says, Laszlo, man, we gotta go. It's what God is telling me to do. Why would you believe somebody like that? This scene says more about the type of people and the mental state that they have to be in to go to Israel rather than an endorsement of Israel. Again, she's literally on smack and gets to this place after also questioning earlier in the film, should anyone go to Israel? To have the film end with Zovia name it is the destination and not the journey is insane. It contradicts the entire film. Of course, the journey is important. It helps us understand the pain that Laszlo has been going through ever since he moved to the United States, attempting to make a decent wage and seeking some level of recognition so that we can understand the undertaking that was even completing this one community center. Without us understanding this journey or knowing this narrative, the destination means nothing, which is ironic considering what Israel is. I think it's fair to say this: no, the film is not endorsing Zionism and is critiquing the ways that Zionism projects convenient narratives to protect itself and falsely justify Israel as a state, and that is done through the projection of a narrative onto something else, which also happens to Laszlo as an artist the entire movie, and you as an audience member are also doing it to the film in ways that are in bad faith. I'm shocked how abruptly this video is going to end, but that's it. That's all that I have here. This is the entire meaning of the film to me. I'm shocked that The Brutalist has been interpreted in so many different ways as it is. Obviously, it's a very thematically rich film. There's a lot going on here that I didn't even dive into earlier in this video, but we can't be taking this film at face value. We need to look at the context of how this film was made and how it's been promoted since then. Brady Corbet literally won an award and used his speech to talk about the fact that No Other Land Does Not Have Distribution, a Palestinian documentary that's documenting what's happened in the West Bank from 2019 to 2023, and the fact that you all saw this, and you can question, is this enough? Should he do more? And think that, oh, he's a Zionist, doesn't really get the full picture of what's going on here. The film says so much, you just need to connect the dots, go a bit deeper, and engage with the journey and not the destination, because what is the destination without the journey in order to understand this epilogue in the entire movie? If you don't like the movie, that's completely fine, but you can't deny the film is very, very deep. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell. I'll see you all next time.